God, I'm so tired. Because I was at this conference in San Francisco all week last week. I flew in on Friday night, and then I hadn't seen my wife in a week, so like we ended up hanging out pretty late on Friday night and into Saturday morning almost. But yeah, that conference was crazy. So
I'm dying to hear about it.
yeah, so it was focused on data science and AI, and so a lot of it was like really technical stuff on like how to build AI projects and like agentic workflows and all this stuff. But there was one talk on Wednesday morning where the speaker started getting kind of wee woo about AI, and talking about like like the way we approach building guardrails for AI so it doesn't hallucinate and does what we want it to do, and talking about how we are doing that the wrong way, where like we're just putting these like strict rules opposed to like trying to all move in the same direction. In the way that like societies are formed is like this like ground up aligning on ideals and goals, and then once you kind of have that solidified, then you add in like the police force to keep people in line. And we've been training AI in the inverse direction, where we're putting these guardrails and rules on it instead of building goals. And then he started talking about how we treat AI, and he said this, I you not, we are creating a new species, and we are their parents.
Lord.
I'm not a Luddite, but
that cues in my
a jump.
brain the Ron Swanson meme where he grabs his computer from his desk and throws it in the dumpster. As soon as I heard that, I was just like, goodbye.
Here's what I love about all this.
I quit.
Did y'all see the new like humanoid robot that just got?
Oh, dude, I want no part in this whatsoever.
But it's like $20,000, and you get this humanoid robot that's supposed to be able to do your chores. The thing about it is if you realize that the humanoid robot is failing at doing the chores, you have to call in someone who's like a remote, who's like handling it remote, and it sees basically into your house from the eyes of the robot. And all I can think is about how absolutely depraved that like this is going to get. People are absolutely going to abuse those poor remote controllers. It's just going to be bad. But yeah, I'm not ready for a humanoid robot. I'm not ready for that either.
I can just picture someone calling tech support and be like, "Fix it! It is vacuuming my dishes again."
Yeah. No, I'm one like, I don't really consider myself a Luddite necessarily either, but like I haven't really interfaced with AI like at all. Like it's not pertinent to like my role at work at all. The only sort of AI that I've ever really used is like Grammarly, which is like basically just like a souped up version of autocorrect in a way that I'll occasionally use to, make sure that I didn't like put commas in the wrong spot occasionally, so that I don't have to, do a crazy top edit on something that I write for, I don't know, my Substack or something. It's like not anything serious, but so much of this stuff just goes totally over my head with like what people are actually using this stuff for. It just like, I think I've kind of come to like, I feel like I understand now like how my grandfather felt as like cell phones came out, and he was like very reluctant to start using this new technology, and we were all like, "Oh no, it's so convenient," and he was just like, "No, this is enough." Like that's where I'm at with this stuff. I'm like, this is where I get off the train, like I'm sure it's going to become so ubiquitous that that's, not going to be a possibility, but I feel so disconnected from the whole thing.
Yeah.
The
so
future state of this.
Go ahead, buddy. All right. So I was going to actually, this sparked something in my brain. Whenever you talked about Grammarly being like, sophisticated autocorrect, or, whatever. At the end of the day, large language models are just a really sophisticated autocomplete. So you're like, when you're texting on your phone and it gives you like suggested next word.
Yeah.
That's all a large language model is. It's just way more sophisticated, and so that's why it's a bit. That's why I said it was a bit wee woo whenever he said that we were creating a new species and we are their parents.
Right.
Luckily, there was another talk at the conference that I was at that was really is more focused on computer vision, but the speaker was got off on this tangent about AI, and he just slammed everyone that uses hallucinate whenever they talk about a model, because he was like, think of linear regression. Whenever you have a linear regression and it predicts a value, if you're predicting sales numbers and it predicts a value and it's wrong, what do we call that? We call that model error.
Yeah.
Error. Yeah, it's model error. So we need to stop anthropomorphizing computers and large language models by extension, and call it what it is. It's model error. It is not a hallucination. It doesn't hallucinate. It's not thinking.
It doesn't have a will. It doesn't have at least now it doesn't have consciousness. That's not even really something that I'm worried about, is sentience or any of this kind of stuff. It's more so just as the agentic stuff is built out more and more to where you can basically cede some of your control over to a model that can kind of predict what decisions you want made, and then it could potentially do things that are mundane, trade a stock for you, because you've given it access to this and that. And I can see stuff like that rolling off the rails of just all these errors compounding on one another in all these different systems and becoming problems. But I don't really fear a Terminator, situation, a Skynet, But I don't know. I mean, I've been wrong about things before, constantly. So,
yeah.
Hey, the good news is one of us passes, we'll just feed all your personality into agentic AI and just keep it rolling.
Just
book
keep it
club will
going,
never
man.
die. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
2 seconds after Taylor's robot his robot replacement comes, I'm gonna pour beer down its gullet and short circuit it.
Yeah, thank you. Put me out of my misery.
One tall boy will end that thing.
Oh my word. No, I think the thing that I kind of get a little bit worried about is, and I'm trying to think of a good way to talk about this without it sounding extremely alarmist or even pretentious, but I just kind of see us, as a culture, becoming more and more siloed in our little online communities, and it seems that a lot of that is an expression of, you could say self obsession in a way. A lot of the things that we interface with, the content that, as people call it now, that we interface with, it seems more of an expression of it's a story that we're telling about ourselves, that we like this kind of stuff in a way. And once all of this AI stuff, the generative stuff particularly, gets to be, and it's already basically indecipherable from reality, a lot of this stuff, we talked about it in the last episode with video stuff that you can barely tell is not real. But with music, with any other form of content that we consume, being able to create your own culture that you are the only person that really has anything to do with, it seems to me to be something dangerous and depressing and kind of lonely. And it just, it makes me think of Infinite Jest, man. The entertainment, like something that is so entertaining, it's so tailored and perfect to you that you can never like look away from it until you just starve to death. Now, of course, in Infinite Jest, he's literally starving to death, but I have a feeling that like there's a sort of like spiritual starvation that will set in with people that aren't speaking the same language. Like we're not having the same cultural experiences anymore. Like we're barely even going to see the same movies half the time, you know? Like there used to be a time when, you know, maybe when all of us were in high school where like there was a ton of content, but like culture was all talking about a few things. It was like everyone was watching Breaking Bad, you know, everybody was watching Game of Thrones, and you know, the water cooler was rife with like conversations about shared, you know, cultural artifacts. I'm trying to think of less pretentious ways, but every time I stumble, I just end up saying something that sounds even more pretentious than the word content. But, you know, like I that's kind of what worries me, is like this weird, like narcissistic, just gazing into the abyss of our own imagination, you know, and not like having anything in common, you know. I don't know
funny.
if that's just me trying to sound smart or if that's a real concern, but
I don't know. I think it's funny you say that. Like I have said a few times before that I miss like old school like linear TV, where you had one episode a week that came out, and so like, oh, Thursday night's the night we're gonna sit down and watch this episode, and then everybody's gonna be talking about it the whole next week until the next episode. Right. And my wife is the exact opposite. Like if any show releases episodes once a week, she's like, I wait till the whole season's done and then I'll watch it, because she wants to be able to binge the whole thing.
Right. Or and also like a lot of people that are like that, they like to know that something has an ending that is going to be satisfying, you know? And like, I think there was like, you know, people talked about with a show like Lost, is everybody in the culture was talking about it, but as it got closer and closer to the end, people became like less and less interested because you know, I actually didn't watch it, but the ending was apparently not satisfying at all. You know, it like in that kind, and I think Game of Thrones was like similar. Like I've heard another show that I haven't watched. I don't even know why I'm talking about this, because clearly I don't even pay attention to what's going on, because I haven't watched like the, you know, two of the most popular shows of the last 20 years. But I don't know. That's just kind of something that I think about, and it's like as we become so used to being able to have the rapid nature of content that can be made by AI, like I can just see a lot of people who make things just getting extraordinarily burnt out trying to keep up with the churn, you know. And I don't know. I think that there will always be a place for stuff that people make, but I don't know. I'm less optimistic about it as time goes on, I think.
That's why you got to start a book club.
Yeah. And get real books, get physical copies of books, because, and it's not because I'm against e-readers or audiobooks, but physical media, man, is the way to go, because nobody can rescind your license to a paperback. You know, that's yours. Anyway.
Well, this feels like a great segue into this book, The Stranger by Albert Camus. So let's cue up the quick author bio.
All right. Take 537. Thanks, Will. Albert Camus was born in French Algeria, November 7th, 1913. His father died in World War I, and he was raised by his mother in a working-class neighborhood of Algiers. At the age of 17, he began to study philosophy at the University of Algiers, but that was cut short due to tuberculosis. Because it always is. And tuberculosis. Camus later moved to Paris and began working as a journalist. And during the Nazi occupation of France, he joined the French Resistance and became the editor of the underground newspaper Combat. Yeah, Nazis. Camus' philosophy centered around what he called the absurd. It's the conflict between our desire for meaning and the world's complete indifference to that desire. Absurdism, I see with a smile on my face. Absurdism begins where existentialism often ends. It accepts the lack of inherent meaning, but it refuses neither despair nor false hope. For Camus, to live with the absurd is to live life without appeal, to recognize life's meaningless and still affirm it fully. In 1942, Camus published The Stranger, the same year that he published his philosophical essay, The Myth of Sisyphus. Camus died January 4th, 1960 in a car accident while traveling through central France. His editor was driving, and when they found his body, he had a train ticket in his coat pocket for the same trip that he was on. Absurd.
So actually, the first time that I read this is actually my second time reading this book. The first time, my wife and I, this was probably in 2018. Actually, you guys would know. What year was the World Cup when France won?
It was 2018.
2018. Okay, so that's when I was there. So we were going to Paris, and I was looking at my bookshelf, and I was trying to figure out what to read because this is actually serendipitous because I just mentioned Infinite Jest. I brought that because I had a few hundred pages left that I intended to finish on the plane, and then I knew that because it's a long flight, and then I knew I'd want to read something while I was there because we had like 10 days. And so I started looking online, and we were staying in a neighborhood called Montmartre, which, if you've seen the new John Wick 5, where he fights up the stairs to the Sacre-Cœur, which is like this really beautiful church that was built in like the early 1900s or whatever. It's that neighborhood. So it's sort of touristy in a way, just because it's like got some famous landmarks, but it's kind of a quaint, cool little area, little neighborhood. And so I just kind of was looking through my bookshelf, and I looked online, and I was like, okay, who lived in Montmartre? I'm just curious. Maybe I have a book that was like written in Montmartre. And turns out that apparently, unless I got bad information, that Camus was living in Montmartre when he wrote The Stranger. And so I grabbed it off the shelf. I was like, this one's been sitting here. And it was funny because I'd actually already read The Plague and The Fall and some other stuff and hadn't read The Stranger, which seems kind of crazy because this is like, the first major one. And there's a picture my wife has of me that I'm sitting outside of this place called Le Consulat with my leg crossed, looking all Parisian with an espresso reading The Stranger in Montmartre. And so I have some vivid memories of reading this book for the first time, and it was fun like rereading it because I got some of those, some of that imagery back. So, what did you guys think about your first read through of part one?
Yeah, this is my second time reading it, and I tried to pay attention more to a few things. So I did something that I never tell people to do, or tell people to never do, which is read the intro or whatever, and here's the translator's note. And it,
mostly because there's typically spoilers.
Exactly. And there's not any big spoilers, but he talks about things that happen in the book, and I like to go into books blind. And what was really cool reading that translator's note is the original English translation of this book was done by a British person, and they did more of a thought for thought type of translation, and tried to get the spirit of what he was saying, but in doing that, you lost some of the style that Camus wrote in. And so the translator, who is, here I got my book with me, Matthew Ward, did the translation and tried to stay more true to his language. And what was really cool is in part one, Camus was really inspired by the American authors, most notably
Hemingway.
Jesus, yeah. I can't remember names. Yeah, Hemingway. And so he wrote part one in that very kind of simplistic short sentence style, and the translator tried to keep true to that as much as possible. So it definitely feels that way. It just feels like this description of what happens, almost like a newspaper.
And you know what's interesting about that is both Hemingway and Camus worked as reporters. And so there's probably something to that just reportage style that inspired both of their kind of concise economy of words. So yeah, that's an interesting parallel there.
For sure. Will, it's your first time. Tell us what you think so far.
Yeah, my first time. I mean, well, first off, I read this part one in one sitting, just because it was A, great to read, and B, it was just I was very captivated, right? I was able to kind of follow the story very well, and the economy of language was certainly something that I had to wrap my brain around because I was filling in a lot, some of these details. So that was it was a stylistic choice that I found myself like. And then paired with the nihilism, absurdism of Camus, I just felt I was like, oh my gosh, okay, man, like
it's kind of stark,
yeah. There's some emptiness here, but I mean, in terms of just the actual story and the characters and the build up to part one, and did not as much as I wanted to get into part two for the sake of this book club, I did not cross the threshold. So and it left us on a quite a cliffhanger, but I know we'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, awesome book.
Definitely a
awesome
cliffhanger.
I
wanted
one thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just remembered something else that the author or the translator said about this book is that I didn't think of anything of it, but apparently this opening line is like a famous opening line of a book.
Oh yeah, for sure. A really famous opening line, yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost as famous as like Call Me Ishmael from Moby Dick, It's like a kind of a seminal literary intro.
Yeah. Do y'all want to do another edition of Jensen Tries to Read Out Loud?
Yes.
Absolutely we do.
Okay. Maman died today. Is that how you pronounce it? I don't know. I always just pretend
Sounds good to me.
Whenever I try to pronounce French words, I just mumble and pretend like there's peanut butter on the roof of my mouth. Maman died today. Or yesterday, maybe. I don't know. I got a telegram from the home. Mother deceased. Funeral tomorrow. Faithfully yours. That doesn't mean anything. Maybe it was yesterday.
It's so good, dude. Like, there is no better way for Camus to have kind of distilled so much of the personality of Meursault just in that opening sentence, or a couple. It may have been more than one sentence, but that little opening part is that is the mark of like a great writer that understands exactly what he's doing, which is something that is definitely apparent when you read Camus, especially because he kind of planned out his literary universe that he was building in 3 parts. And I won't get too like deep into that because number one, he tragically died fairly young before completing the third arc, or really getting into the third arc that he had planned. But he knew exactly where he was taking his, not only just his like literary ideas, but his philosophy too. And he was pretty adamant that he wasn't a philosopher. Which is probably something that we would think of as like, oh, he's just being a little, he's being evasive. He's like, oh, I'm no philosopher. Like, I'm not that. But he considered himself an artist, a writer, a literary man. And like, that's super apparent with a strong opening like that. These just really distilled themes. Everything is just wrapped up. He knows exactly where he's going. And it tells you a ton about Meursault right there in the opening. It's awesome.
Yeah, he's absolutely dead inside.
Right.
Yeah.
In a way, yeah. And
yeah.
I want to here's something that Camus said, and I'm gonna do. This is a little bit of a paraphrase because I left out some of the stuff in the middle, but this is what Camus kind of said about The Stranger. I think that this may have appeared as like a foreword or something like that in one of the editions, early-ish edition. He says that the hero is condemned because he doesn't play by the rules. He refuses to lie, and he says lying is not only saying what isn't true, but it's also especially not saying. He said, especially saying more than is true. And when you think about that in the context of how Meursault interacts with everybody, you can look at it from how Will said, like, he's just kind of numb, dead inside, or he is just telling the truth exactly as it appears to him, which to us comes across as like nihilistic and empty and dead. And maybe it actually is, but for Meursault's psychology, he's just not going to play this game of like pretending to believe things he doesn't believe, saying things that he doesn't think are true, or or as Camus says, saying more than is actually true, and I think that flavors some of his dialogue and interactions as we go through this first part.
Yeah. Will, I'm curious, like, really just like, I want to, in general, kind of go through some of just like these key interactions that happen, to kind of overview how he communicates with his boss, the employees at the home, his experience at the funeral, then also his girlfriend and his neighbors, kind of essentially working our way through the book. But like, I really want to, especially from you hearing as a person who's reading this for the first time, like how you're feeling about these interactions and what things stood out to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it was really difficult to put myself in his shoes because I absolutely do not think this way. I'm sure, as both of y'all who know me and have known me for decades, you can attest to the fact that like I do not think like him. Really, I don't. Like when he was interacting with his boss and he had a great opportunity and he thought about going to Paris and then he just didn't have ambition, and I wanted to slap him across the face. I'll be completely honest. I was like, dude, wake up. It's right there sitting at your feet. And then on the other side of it, like, he's living in a bit of a daydream. And again, I know I'm reading this for the first time and I have a very probably one-sided perspective on this. This is just face value, first pass. But then when he's interacting with Marie and, falling in love and they're talking, she's just like this joy and warmth, and he is so cold to her.
Do you love me?
And he says, I don't think I do. And that doesn't even mean anything.
Yes. And then she goes like, what does she say? She's like, would you say this to another, or would you marry another woman if she asked you as well, or something to that? And he's like, yeah, I would. Yeah. Probably. I was flabbergasted reading this. I just could not. Yeah. I just found myself absolutely just floored. That's like because
peak Andrew Tate negging a woman.
It just
it
did not track for me. It really did not track for me.
Well, and I know, and I think that's good, and I think it's important too that like I don't think Camus was trying to necessarily have this book be like prescriptive of like, this is the way one should live if they want to live authentically or anything like that. He's kind of cagey and difficult to pin down on like what is he actually trying to say. And like I've been kind of wrestling with it because the first time that I read it, I had a really similar experience, and I kind of read almost this whole first opening, part one, as being like this is like an extension almost of like The Underground Man from Notes from Underground by Dostoevsky. It's like this guy is almost like just nihilistic and doesn't think anything has any meaning, and he's gonna make himself miserable, like, of course, right? Like that's, and I think that there's maybe more going on than that, but I think that read is just as valid. Like if you don't want to end up super miserable, this is what it's like when you live your life as if nothing has any meaning,
right. And I will not name any names, but there have been people I know in our history that we've grown up with who were very nihilistic, and I found myself thinking to those people when I was reading some of these passages and being really bothered because that view of the world to me is just so shaded and dark, and you just lose so much purpose, in my opinion. again, he's staying true to himself. And Taylor, I absolutely understand that perspective as well. And I think it's a very astute and valid description of his beliefs. He's telling the truth. You're right. You know, he's living authentically as he is, but man, you are missing out on so many potential wonderful parts of your life, you young man. I just felt like a dad. I wanted to just
smack him. Yeah,
wake up, son.
Well,
wake up.
And there's something interesting there too, because you see similar visions of like detachment through different men, particularly in the early parts of this story. Like his neighbor, whose dog runs away, and it's a dog that he's only ever like mistreated in public. He hits him, he yells at him, he calls him a stinking bastard all the time. I think is like he clearly like he treats this dog with like such antipathy, as if he kind of hates him. And then when the dog goes missing, he just talks about how they're gonna take him away from me. If the dog catchers discover him somewhere, they're gonna take him away. And it's like this weird. There's something weird going on with a lot of the men in this part, because they all treat things as if they don't care about them. Like Merceau definitely does. Like he's almost he's the perfect vision of someone who doesn't care about anything. And all these other men almost live like they don't care about anything, but then when push comes to shove, it turns out that like really their detachment is more so, you could say maybe there's a weird societal expectation that, they don't want to be tender towards an animal or a woman like his friend. But they're terrified of losing these things. And that's almost why there's almost like this, I mean, I'm not much of a Freudian, but there's almost like this Freudian repression thing going on, where like because they're repressing their care towards these things, it manifests itself as like violence, And at first I thought maybe that's what was happening with Merceau, but it seems like he's more of like the not perfect. I don't know what exactly that word is, but like he's the archetype of like not caring because he actually doesn't, but these other people almost pretend like they don't care, but they actually do, and their repression comes out as that.
Yeah. His antipathy, is that the word? Not antipathy. I don't.
It's a good word. I don't know.
Okay. I'm not sure I know what it means, but like him not caring. It would be hilarious if it wasn't so sad. Like whenever he goes to his boss and says, "Hey, I gotta take 2 days off of work because my mom died. I gotta go bury her." And like his boss seems like he might be upset, and his first thought is, "Well, it's not my fault."
Yeah, I didn't kill her. Yeah.
So Jensen, it's funny that you say it's almost hilarious because like some of these characters, like the Salamano and his dog, I was thinking it's like it is almost this like toxic, codependent sitcom energy. It just genuinely was like borderline hilarious, but like really sad, in that this is actually how they were living their lives and treating them. Anyways, it's funny that you
stinking
mentioned
bastard. Boop, boop,
Yeah.
boop, 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 boop.
yeah, cue bass slap. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad, but it also struck me as like eminently true about like how like I definitely have seen people behave this way towards things that they. I keep having to use the word repression because that's the thing that it seems to explain it the best, but like because they're for whatever reason societal expectations or some weird philosophical hang up, they can't admit it seemed to me, I wrote this down, was like they're afraid to lose these things, and like the fear of losing these things manifests in this kind of like outward apathy, like in a weird way. Like if I don't care, then it won't hurt me when it goes away. Does that make sense? Like that's almost what it seems like with the neighbor and his dog, Salamano. And so when I was continuing to read, I was looking for that in Meursault as like, oh, is this what Camus is getting at? And I'm not sure. I think there's something else going on with Meursault. I think Camus is using those as like a foil of like, this is the normal way that people act like Meursault. He's doing he's doing his own thing, you know?
Raymond. Should we just dive into Raymond?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
I love that relationship started because Meursault was too lazy to cook himself dinner, and he was like, "Yeah, I'll eat dinner with you."
Yeah. He's just.
But again, like Meursault just goes along with everything. Like he almost seems like somebody without any will, you know. That in a weird way, but I think it gets a little bit deeper than that as we go along. But that's kind of what it seems like at this point, especially, is like he almost doesn't make any decision for himself. He's just like whatever is presented to him, he just takes it as it comes, you know?
Well, I even saw that in like, you know, when Raymond was, you know, beating his girlfriend and the police came and everything. The way that was described from his perspective just seemed so point of fact, right? He just almost felt like a real opinion, you know, about the whole situation, was just kind of reporting on it, and that was that, and here we go. And anyone else, any other neighbor would probably be like terrified and, you know, horrified that this was occurring, and it was just, you know, he just kind of waffled around it, and it was very hard for me to, again, find myself in those shoes, because I just felt a much more visceral reaction, I think, when I was reading it personally.
Sure.
You know, so.
Yeah, and I don't think
there's still so much
really understand Meursault. Like, sorry, go ahead.
I was about to say of Raymond and his girlfriend, the tragic humor of like after the police come and he gets off without being charged for beating her because she cheated on him. They're like, well, she cheated on him, so, you know, it's fair game, really. It's so f***ed up.
Right, and it's also kind of unclear whether or not that was actually what happened, too.
Yeah.
That was the kind of the story that he told himself. Like, maybe the thing that he was scared to lose was, like, his pride, you know? He couldn't stand to think that there was any possibility that she was, you know? So he reacted similarly to Salamano as when the dog runs away. It's like a similar, like, just violent outburst. And part of me I'm kind of retreading this, but both of those examples are examples of a type of repression that leads to a violent outburst. And I wonder if Camus did that on purpose because he's trying to set you up for what ends up happening at the very end of this part, to make us think that that's what's going on with Meursault, and then to kind of turn that on its head eventually. Like, I wonder if that's almost like a red herring in a way, you know?
Yeah, that's a really, really excellent.
Really astute connection. Wow, yeah. Didn't even think about that.
So,
I could
not
be totally
to generalize.
I'm just
I mean, no, I mean, I'm sitting here just like now, almost like trying to reread this whole first part in my head, thinking about what comes toward the tail end. Also, not to double down on a potential point that doesn't really have any meaning here, but that whole line of like him basically Raymond being let off because his girlfriend cheated on him, and everyone's just kind of like, well, that makes sense. Was that a sign of the times? Like culturally, do you think? Also, do we have any?
I can't speak to that. My only guess would be, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that the woman in question was Arab. So in Algiers, where they are, this is like kind of an Arabic-ish region that was a colony of France. And during Camus' lifetime, I believe after he would have written this, Algeria has a revolution and becomes an independent state. They, have a revolution against France. So my guess would be that there is some sort of a kind of a colonial kind of class system going on here, where the someone like Raymond, who was a Frenchman, probably had a little bit more rights than the Arab woman would have. That's my guess.
Gotcha.
And
Gotcha.
I should do a little bit more reading of that whole like part of history is kind of a blind spot for me. I know a little bit about the revolution there, but not nearly enough to speak to that too intelligently.
Again, okay. Well, that's interesting insight, because again, I was reading this and being like disturbed by the whole thing happening, and yet felt like it was kind of water under the bridge pretty quickly. And so I didn't know if there was maybe something between the lines that I was missing, or, just more from a cultural perspective. I didn't know if there's any additional context that would have made that a lot more clear to me.
Yeah, and that's totally a guess, and that's if I'm remembering correctly that she, because the reason that I think that, and I should have written this down, but the reason that I'm remembering that is because the Arab men that end up following them, it's in relation to what happens with this girl, correct?
Yeah, I think it's her brother.
Yeah, her brother and a couple other guys.
Yeah, I do want to circle back before we dive into the ending, because I feel like that'll be a longer discussion. I wanted to talk a bit about his interactions with people at the nursing home for his mother's funeral. Really starting with the home director and the caretaker. And like I was thinking about it and trying to be clever while I was kind of writing some notes for this part of the book, and like thinking about all of the reactions from arriving and speaking to the director and the caretaker, and then even especially with the rest of the residents that come to the wake, is like it all feels like he is a stranger that is just being tasked with handling these affairs.
Sense, yeah.
Yeah. And the way that like, and it creates this a bit of kind of surprise in people, like whenever the caretaker comes in to unscrew the casket so he can look at his mother, and he's like, "No, don't worry about it." So like,
isn't he asked twice? It's twice, right? Or is it just once? Maybe
I believe you're right. I think he asks him again, like, "Are you sure you don't want to look?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when he gets there, and he's like, he stops him from unscrewing the casket, and then the next morning, the nursing home director is like, "Hey, they're about to lock it down. This is your last chance. Do you want to take a look before we go?"
No, that's a great point, and I want to bring this up too because I have it written down. Is Camus writes in The Myth of Sisyphus, which is a philosophical essay that I believe he wrote like 4 months after the publication of The Stranger, and we've referenced this essay before on an earlier episode, maybe the first episode. So it'd be a good one to go back and read if you just want some additional context into how Camus kind of thinks about the absurd. But he writes here, in a universe suddenly deprived of illusions and enlightenment, man feels himself a stranger. So that's, I think, giving us a little bit of a glimpse into not only the literal sense to which, he's behaving as a stranger in this situation, but because of the way that he understands the universe, he is intrinsically a stranger because the world no longer has anything to offer him really, and anything meaningful, So I thought that was just kind of an interesting additional piece from Camus.
There's also some references, I think, while he's at his mother's wake, that we see play out later throughout in the book. Like whenever he's there and like the wake's about to start and they flip on the lights and it's blinding and oppressive to him. and it makes him disoriented and feels sleepy.
This is important. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we see that again after, as the book says, the Arabs come upon the beach and they start their brawl.
That is a really, really interesting thing that you noticed, because this is something that I've heard some people talk about in some of the outside research that I was doing, is that light and sunlight play a symbolic role throughout, at least, as far as we're talking this first part. And so I was curious, just to kick it over to you guys, what do you think this might represent? Like, we see, like you just mentioned, kind of the oppressive light in the wake. He uses a similar language on the beach, particularly when he is kind of, he goes back. We'll talk about at the end, but he goes through pains to mention how kind of oppressive the sunlight and light is in general, multiple times. So what do we think he might be getting at with some of that? Like, what do you think maybe light represents in the context of what we know about Meursault and like his worldview? I know that's like a huge question to just throw, but
The answer is 42. So that's how big it feels to me.
Yeah.
Oh man, I don't think I had thought about it deeply. Will, maybe you might have a better thought on it, but like, I just thought it was this like literary connection. But
it is. But
it also,
I think there might be a symbol.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd be right whenever you think about the two situations that he's in, and go ahead, Will.
No, I don't really have a super strong perspective because, again, I haven't really like thought about this too deeply. I mean, there's a part of me that feels like I want to take the easy way out and just say, like, thinking about being blindsided by some realization or truth, there's the key of enlightenment and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. It feels like a cop-out just because of the word blindsided and all that. But, I mean, I do feel like that is something there potentially. And then, again, not to jump too far into the end, which I know we'll get there, but there is also the fact that the light played a part in his disorientation. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, the light of, kind of how I thought about it was like, it maybe just like exactly what you said represents truth, like the truth. And the truth in this context is not what we may typically think of when we think of the truth, and light. We might come at it from, more of our Western kind of a Christian idea of like, sunlight representing, the light of truth, and that means the truth of God, or the universal truth. I think it does represent the universal truth to Meursault, but it's not the truth that we may be very comfortable with, which is the world is completely indifferent. The universe is completely indifferent to everything. Like it will, there's mention of the sun's in his eyes at multiple times, kind of blinding him, like you mentioned. The very nature of the world is to be disorienting in a way. And yeah, there's definitely something interesting there.
The only thing I was going to just double down on what you said is how uncomfortable the light was in both of those situations. Just It was stark, and he was uncomfortable, and it was almost like the truth is not something that's going to be, it's not going to let you down easy. It's going to be an awakening that's going to force you to realize things about yourself or to your point.
Yeah, and it may be like it may be that the truth is actually like unsettling by its nature. Like it's not the kind of truth that one discovers and it, causes them to live a better life. Like we talked about with Ivan Ilyich is, Tolstoy uses some similar imagery of, light right towards the end, as he's stuffed down into the dark, bag of his despair, and, he starts to see light. Tolstoy writes something about like there was no death, there was light. So we might be kind of used to thinking about light in that context of like the comforting truth of the universe. And I think with Camus, it's almost the truth isn't really comforting at all. Now, I think that later on in some of Camus' writings, he would be able to confront this truth and give more of a positive vision for how one might live knowing this truth. But for now, especially in part one, we have no idea, and probably not even through this book at all, like what that positive vision could possibly be. It's more so this is the confrontation with the absurd, which is the universe is indifferent. That's kind of what it seems like to me.
It kind of, I had this visual and you were saying that, and then I was trying to think about when I was reading this where my brain was. Jensen, you mentioned how, the starkness of the light came on and, he was kind of just taken aback. And I mean, I kind of think about it like if you imagine, imagine you were in a car wreck and you wake up in the hospital and, there's just the bright fluorescent lights above you. And you're kind of coming to and you're realizing like, yes, I'm in a hospital, something that can help me, but like I'm in a dire situation as well. It's kind of that, kind of dual situation where both, yes, I'm maybe now in a hopefully better situation than the car wreck, but the reality is I'm sitting in the hospital and who knows what's going to happen at the tail end of this. And so, that's
it's a knife that cuts both ways,
Right.
Well, I think it's it's important to note it's like in Meursault's conception and possibly in Camus, the universe is indifferent, and Meursault lives as if that's the truth of the universe, which kind of gives a little bit of insight. It doesn't exactly justify necessarily, but it explains why he lives the way that he does, because he realizes that the universe doesn't care. Like it's all absurd and random and whatever. And so he lives as if everything is absurd and random. And that's why he never really ever makes a decision. We'll get into it in part two, a little bit more into that part of what he's, why he makes the ultimate decision that he makes at the end. But it is just kind of interesting that, like, for myself, I read, and I don't think that this was necessarily the point that Camus was trying to make, but for myself, I read this as almost a cautionary tale. It's like, this is what happens when you live as if the world is, and the universe is indifferent to your actions. Of course you would live this way. You're just going to make whatever decision is comfortable in that one moment with absolutely no thought into the future for what your actions may create. And
I don't know if I can agree with that entirely. I think that Sartre might agree with you, and but I don't like. I think maybe this will. Whenever you had initially asked me a question, this may have been what you were wanting to get at, is like dealing with and confronting this absurdity of knowing the universe is indifferent, and you don't matter, and if I guess you could even go nihilistic and be like, well, on a long enough timeline, nothing I do will matter either. But I don't think that necessarily you have to take this nihilistic viewpoint just because you are confronted with the universe being indifferent. You can choose to think the way that I have come to view this, in that because there's no kind of design or plan or whatever that I am supposed to fulfill. Like, I don't have some, mission that is or goal or whatever placed upon me that I have to live up to. I get to choose for myself what I make of this life and how I choose to derive meaning. And I am not under the thumb of some meaning that is pressed upon me. So really, I think it comes down to what you do with that knowledge. So you can, on either side, take a negative or positive view. Like, if you believe that the universe is imbued with deep meaning and purpose, you can absolutely feel oppressed by it. And I have definitely been there before, where you feel the weight of the universe on your shoulders because of that. But you can also, on the positive side, view that the universe has all of this meaning, and feel empowered, and that you are a part of something that is infinitely bigger than yourself. On the flip side, if the universe is indifferent and nothing matters, or not necessarily nothing matters, nothing has meaning, you can end up like Marisol, where you're a nihilist and you're just, and even hedonistic, where you just do what feels good in the moment. Or you can be set free from the oppression of someone else's will pressing down upon you.
Right. And I think what you've explicated there is like, that's the positive vision, right?
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, that's completely valid. But Meursault seems to not have gotten to that positive vision, maybe. Is
100%. I think that's why this is a cautionary tale.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. And I wonder if it turns out that way by the time we get to the end. I'm not sure. And I also have a feeling that like Camus would potentially recoil at us viewing it as a cautionary tale, Because I always feel when I read Camus that there's something going on under the surface that I'm not quite tracking.
Mm-hmm.
But part of reading great books is talking about how they impress upon us, as individuals. That's why you never read the same book twice. You can read, this is the second time that I've read The Stranger, and I feel like I'm reading a completely different book now in my 30s than when I was in my mid 20s.
For
and
sure.
So I think that that's an important note too, is like all of these interpretations are valid because they're coming from our own, impressions upon, having read them. And I think that's important to be able to kind of understand how these things make us feel and then talk about them. So I think that's a great point.
I mean, you bring up a great point about place and time in your life and how you've derived a different meaning, maybe now in your 30s than you had in your 20s when you first read it. Thinking about who I was probably when I was 18, if I would have read this when I was 18, I probably would have found myself more in line with him and how he believed and maybe saw the world. And maybe since I have a little bit more life underneath me and, more purpose, I think, in my own personal life, I find it hard to relate in those ways, So anyways, it's a great, I think, again, a sign of a great author, someone who basically presents the facts and allows you to, impress upon it your own belief. And yet there's still a tale to be told and, meaning to derive from each thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I mean, I don't even think that Camus necessarily thought that because in light of the absurdity of the universe, that meant that there wasn't meaning. He did say, I think also in the myth of Sisyphus, that the meaning of life is whatever you're doing that's keeping you from killing yourself, which is, kind of a comedic line in a way. But, he did think that you could create meaning. But I think that, at least in Meursault's case, in the face of the absurd, he chose to just go along with the whims of the absurd,
Yeah. So I think we've danced around it a few times. Are we going to say out loud the thing that happens at the end of part one?
Yeah. Let's do like a quick. We tend to be a little bit bad about giving like plot overviews. So, and this one's a little bit difficult to do a plot overview because it kind of meanders a little bit in some different directions. But why don't you go ahead and catch us up to the culminating incident of the first part?
Cool. So just to like recap and kind of catch us up, we meet Meursault whenever his mother dies. He travels down to Algiers or outside of town to go to the wake and the funeral, and he interacts with some people there, like the other residents at the home who sit on the opposite side of the casket and never interact with him. And he has then after he gets home, he meets up with Marie, and they start to have a relationship. And he tells stories about his neighbor Salamano, and then becomes friends with Raymond upstairs, who beats his girlfriend because she cheated on him. Then where we get to now is they are going to a beach day because Raymond has some friends that have a bungalow on the beach, and as they're leaving, they come across the Arabs that we mentioned earlier that are standing outside, and we find out that one of them is the brother of Raymond's girlfriend that he assaulted. So they run and hop on the trolley and go down to the beach day. And they go out swimming for a little bit, and they come in for lunch. And whenever they were out swimming, they go for a walk on the beach, and they come across the Arabs. This was after lunch. They go out for a walk on the beach, come across the Arabs, and Raymond decides he's going to stand his ground and fight them. And he says, "Hey, if it kicks off, like, get my back." And so he steps forward. His buddy immediately goes after the other guy and clocks him and knocks him into the ocean. And Raymond is fighting with a brother, and he turns around to Meursault and is like, essentially like, "Hey, check this out." And at that point, whenever his back is turned, the woman's brother pulls out a knife and slashes Meursault.
Or Raymond.
Raymond, sorry. He slashes Raymond, and then they run away. The Arabs run away, and they have to help Raymond back to the cottage so he can get bandaged up. At this point, Meursault is being oppressed by the indifference of the universe, symbolized by the unbearable heat and sun in his eyes, and he can't bear to walk up the steps of the cottage anymore, and decides to walk back down along the beach. Something I didn't mention prior is whenever they do come upon the Arabs, Raymond has a pistol in his pocket, and before the fight starts, he hands it over to Meursault to hold on to it while they're fighting. Which I have to say, like, that is kind of a bit of an honorable thing. Like, instead of just, blasting
right.
somebody, like, I'm gonna give you a fair fight. Let's throw hands. I don't need to use a gun.
Yeah.
So from here, Taylor, I'll let you take over and cover what's happening next. You might be able to do a better job explaining details from here.
I'll try. So Merceau heads down the beach again, again, sort of in this weird, on a whim kind of a way. Like he's even talking to himself about, he could just stay inside, where everything is nice and they're all having kind of a nice day. But he just keeps walking, and he wants to walk back down by the spring where they first came upon the three Arabs. And lo and behold, he gets down there, and one of the men is still lying out on the beach, just hanging out. And they make eye contact, and the sun is in Merceau's eyes, and he's feeling this, as Jensen mentioned, this kind of oppressive, unbearable, nature of the universe on him. And the Arab, gets up, and the reason we keep saying Arab is that's how they're referred to in the book. Yeah. We don't get names for these people, so we're not just throwing out random identifiers. But stands up and he produces his knife again, and Merceau has the gun, and as the sun is in his eyes, he indifferently, almost passively pulls the trigger. And the man falls, and he walks over and he puts 5 more in him. And that's where it ends. That's where part 1 ends.
And I want to read the last sentence, or last couple of sentences, because it is so chilling. Yeah. He said, I knew that I had shattered the harmony of the day, the exceptional silence of a beach where I had been happy. Then I fired 4 more times at the motionless body where the bullets lodged without leaving a trace. And it was like knocking 4 quick times on the door of unhappiness. Ladies and gentlemen, that is one of the most chilling lines I think I've read in a novel.
Yeah, that is brilliant. I misspoke. It was 4, not 5 extra additional shots, but incredible last line to part 1. If you guys have been reading along with us, thanks so much. This will conclude part 1 of The Stranger by Albert Camus. Join us in 2 weeks, and we are going to discuss part 2. So if you haven't gotten your copy yet, go ahead and grab one, catch up, read part 1, listen to this again, see what you think, and then jump in for part 2 in a couple weeks. It's been great talking to you guys. See you next time.
That was great, boys.
See ya.
See you in a few weeks.